I'm Harvey Weinstein, filling in for Piers Morgan. And I've got to tell you, when Piers asked me to do this, I thought he was kidding. He wasn't. So I went to one of the smartest people I know to ask for advice, Oprah Winfrey. We'll hear from her coming up. But here's what she told me. She said, if you're nervous, tell people you're nervous. Well, I am a little nervous, but I'm also very excited. I'm a friend and supporter of Bill Clinton, so it's an honor to introduce my very special guest, the 42nd President of the United States, William Jefferson Clinton.
Hi, Harvey.
I don't know what you got yourself into.
The things I do for you.
The things you do for me is correct. You know, you're so comfortable, Mr. President, with people. Every time I see you, you're relaxed, you talk straight ahead of people. You know, I'm a little nervous, so how do you do that?
You look them in the eye and forget about what else is going on.
Now, if I were to make a movie about your life, who would you want? And don't worry, you can name any actor. We won't tell anybody. Who would you want to play you, Mr. President?
Gosh, I don't know. I don't know. I would trust your judgment more than mine on that.
Brad Pitt? George Clooney?
Too good looking. George Clooney is at least more my size.
Right, and not that good looking either.
No, too good looking. But you know, you could put bulbous things on his nose. You could do makeup with him. And he was great. His movie last year was great. You know, his Hawaii movie. What was the name of the movie?
Descendants.
It's fabulous.
Right.
He was so good in it, so real.
I thought it was great too. And Hillary, who would you play Hillary in this movie?
Meryl Streep.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's so funny you say Meryl Streep because I was with you guys, you know, in the Kennedy Center honors, and Nora Ephron made a speech and she said, careful, Mrs. Clinton, Meryl is being sweet to you, nice to you. She's being great to your kids, great to Chelsea, great to your husband. But just you wait and see. She's getting ready to do you, just as she did the Iron Lady, you know what I mean, for us this year. You were the first president that I thought was really cool. And I guess for me, even I knew you were cool. But for the American people, I think it was that magical moment when you were on the Arsenio Hall show. All of a sudden, a presidential candidate puts on his shades and takes out a saxophone and plays really cool and really good. Arsenio told Piers Morgan that it was his idea. Is that true, or is that your idea?
No, he invited me to play.
He did invite you to play.
And
what possessed you to do that in the middle of a presidential race?
Well, I hadn't played in a couple of years. And I started playing, and I got to play with Kenny G at an event. He did an event for me. And I just was feeling pretty comfortable doing it, and they wanted to play God Bless the Child. I think we did that. Right. And then we did either Summertime or My Funny Valentine. They weren't hard, and it was fun. You
know, today, George W. Bush got his portrait unveiled at the White House. And we're going to take a look, you know, at that. But I just want to remind you that you invited me all those years ago when you got your portrait unveiled at the White House. It was right in the middle of the whole calamity over Fahrenheit 9/11, which is a movie that Michael Moore and I made. I came, I had to go on the receiving line with President Bush, and I'll never forget what he said to me. He said, Harvey, I used to love your movies. What the hell happened to you?
So he's got a good sense of humor.
He does, doesn't he? Let's take a look at this footage from George W. Bush today at the White House.
I'm also pleased, Mr. President, that when you are wandering these halls as you wrestle with tough decisions, you will now be able to gaze at this portrait and ask, what would George do?
You know, speaking of uncool, Donald Trump has a benefit for Mitt Romney. And I know Donald Trump to be a sane, smart businessman. But he has this benefit. Romney comes and he talks about that birth certificate again. How do you put that out of the minds of the American public once and for all? And doesn't he realize how uncool he is?
I don't know. You know, Donald Trump has been uncommonly nice to Hillary and me. We're all New Yorkers. And
me too.
And I like him, and I love playing golf with him. But the evidence is pretty clear that President Obama was born in Hawaii, and this whole election should not be about any of these side issues. It really ought to be about the decisions that each of them will make on where we are and where we need to go. And it's a serious time, so I'd like to see the election turn back to that.
There's a new ad where you praise, you know, President Obama for pulling the trigger on Osama bin Laden. Mitt Romney made a number of statements. He said he wouldn't cross, into Pakistan to kill an enemy of America. He said he wouldn't spend billions of dollars, hunting just one person. Do you think Mitt Romney would have pulled the trigger if he was the president?
I don't know that, and I don't think anybody can know. The main thing I wanted to say is President Obama was told, look, this is probably Osama bin Laden. We're not 100% sure. You could take that house out with an armed drone and not risk the soldiers. But if it's not a bin Laden, you're going to wind up killing whoever's there, plus his wife or wives, plus any kids that might be there, plus any other people. And they decided to go in there, he did, and go after bin Laden, be sure he could be identified, and minimize the casualties, even at greater risk to the Navy SEALs who went in. And I thought it was a pretty brave decision and the correct one.
I thought so too. Mr. President, in my world, we're all for, gay marriage, and, but the president, did he take a risk? Was it a mistake politically, to come out in support of it?
Well, I think, yes, it was somewhat risky, because a lot of his African-American support in the churches are not for it. And because if you look at what's happening in America as people change their position, just as I have on it, what happens is personal experience changes your position. The more gay friends you have, the more you see them adopting children and taking good care of them and being good parents, the more you think, who am I to say to them what they should call their relationship? If the law permits it, or if a given church permits it, who are we to stand in the way? For people who don't know a large number of gay people, who haven't had experiences with stable gay families, it's a different thing. So he took a risk. I think it's the right position. I think it's where we're going. I think that he deserves credit for doing it.
The race between Obama and Romney, how close do you think that race will be?
Can't tell yet. I still think the president will win by 5 or 6 points. I've always thought so.
Well, you are the best predictor of that.
But it's closer than that today.
It is.
But
why?
Because of the condition of the economy. Because even though we're outperforming Europe and Japan compared to where we were the day after the crash, and we've created more private sector jobs in this economy in 3.5 years since President Obama took office than in the 7 years and 8 months before the crash in the previous administration. But still, people feel uncertain. When you got a lot of people getting up in the morning, looking in the mirror, starting the day thinking they failed, that's a problem. And I think those of us who support the president have to get out there and explain what he did in rescuing the automobile industry, what he did in raising the mileage standards in a way that created 150,000 jobs and had everybody agreeing, management, the unions, the government, the environmental groups, what he did in both saving the financial institutions, but signing that Dodd-Frank bill so that there'd be higher capital requirements and this kind of meltdown would not occur again in the future. Those things need to be explained, and the American people also, that is, the budget he's offered, if passed, would reduce the deficit and the national debt 5-10 years from now much more than anything his opponent and his opponent's party has offered. If we get that out, I think he'll be just fine, and I think he'll be reelected.
Governor Romney keeps talking about his experience at Bain Capital as a producer of jobs and that he had 25 years in the private sector. It seems to play with a certain group. But do you think that really will affect people and think that he can produce jobs that the president can't?
I think it will affect some people who relate well to businessmen. And I think he had a good business career. There's a lot of controversy about that, but if you go in and you try to save a failing company, and you and I have friends here who invest in companies, you can invest in a company, run up the debt, loot it, sell all the assets, and force all the people to lose their retirement and fire them. Or you can go into a company, have cutbacks, try to make it more productive with the purpose of saving it. And when you try, like anything else you try, you don't always succeed. Not every movie you made was a smash hit.
That's for sure.
So I don't think that we ought to get into the position where we say this is bad work. This is good work. I think, however, the real issue ought to be, what has Governor Romney advocated in the campaign that he will do as president? What has President Obama done, and what does he propose to do? How do these things stack up against each other? That's the most relevant thing. There's no question that in terms of getting up and going to the office and, you know, basically performing the essential functions of the office, a man who's been governor and had a sterling business career crosses the qualification threshold. But they have dramatically different proposals, and it's my opinion anyway that the Obama proposals and the Obama record would be far better for the American economy and most Americans than those that Governor Romney's laid out. That's what the election ought to be about.
Mr. President, we'll be right back, and we're going to talk about a proposed ban on sugary drinks in New York by Mayor Bloomberg and the Clinton Global Initiative when we come back. Thank you, Mr. President.